All right. Hey, the NFC North finally has a group of coaches that is all set for at least the foreseeable future. Kevin O'Connell getting extended today, multi-year extension there. Dan Campbell, of course, is already locked up. You got Matt LaFleur firmly entrenched in Green Bay. And now your Chicago Bears have Mr. Ben Johnson as their head coach. I got to give you a big congratulations, my friend. Huge hire. Awesome stuff. I'm really excited to see what the Bears are going to do with Ben Johnson moving
I
forward.
feel like George W. Bush on the aircraft carrier, mission accomplished behind me, where it's like, no, there's still a lot of work probably to do.
Right, yeah. It's like, no, we've done
the
it all.
The war's going to last for another 15 years, but it feels like it just feels so good. I called
Was
my
it a
younger
relief?
brother. Well, to me, first off, I'll say I called my younger brother yesterday and I was just like, we were talking. I'm just like, this, like, it really, after how painful this season was, because remember, 9 months ago, this was a season that we were supposed to compete. It was a building season. And we talked so much about, well, then Eberflus, they'll make a decision on him at the end of the year, but he'll win 9 or 10 games. And then you can kind of fire him like you fired Lovey. Like, well, you weren't good enough and ha, ha, ha. But now we move on. And it just was such a disaster of a season that it truly made me feel like we're going to end up with a bottom of the barrel candidate and really be stuck in such a rut. And so what I love
because
so
you can't
much
have nice things in Chicago.
Yes,
Is that essentially
exactly
what it is? Yeah.
What I love so much about this is, first off, I picked the Lions to win, and I wanted the Lions to win. I was rooting for the Lions. If I had known that by the Lions losing in 48 hours, I'd have Ben Johnson, I would have been like Washington's biggest fan. I would have been left hand up the whole way, like upset the Lions, get them out of there, get me Ben Johnson ASAP. I'm so surprised how quickly it happened. Ben Johnson did not, to my knowledge, do a formal in-person interview with anyone but the Chicago Bears. And to me, what's so exciting is if the Patriots job never came open, I do think the Bears would have still, like, Mike Vrabel would have had like that real strong attraction to the Bears. I really do think that. But
yeah,
because Vrabel was out of the picture, truly the number one candidate, and a lot of people would argue Ben Johnson was the number one candidate over Mike Vrabel, but the number one candidate, as soon as he was available to sign a deal, just picked the Chicago Bears and said, let's fucking go. To me,
he didn't sit there and let people fight for him.
That means he knew the whole time, this is the job I want. And credit to the Chicago Bears for having done the research. They kind of played around with everyone, interviewing a million different people. But in the end, knowing that what we're going to do is we are going to be ready to make the godlike offer to him. I've heard reports that it's no less than 5 years. And I've heard reports that the salary is at least $13 million, which makes Ben Johnson the seventh highest
per
coach.
year. Wow.
Yeah. Seventh highest paid coach in the NFL. Now you may be seeing that's insane. To put it in a different perspective, McDonald, who got hired by the Seattle Seahawks last year as a defensive coordinator after 1 year as a defensive coordinator with the Ravens, young guy like Ben Johnson, he got 4 or 5 years at a reported 9 or 10 million. So you talk about a defensive coordinator to a head coach versus the wonderkin offensive guy. I don't think that's crazy. And I do think what's so exciting for me is that this is the opposite of what the Bears have done. Kevin Warren has gotten a lot of flack already in Chicago, but Kevin Warren's imprints and fingerprints are already implanted on this organization. The Chicago Bears had never fired a coach midseason. They did in the year and a half that Kevin Warren's been there. The Chicago Bears never overpaid and spent money for the big name coach. They did that. They were paying Eberflus, it was reported, about $5 million a year. And so you jump up to a guy like this. It's an incredible step forward for the franchise. Now, I know what everyone's saying. Mark, what proof do you have this is going to be successful? I have no proof it's going to be successful. But I do have a couple things, so I can get into this. I do have a couple things that I'm excited about. First and foremost, a year ago at this point in time, if you talk to 32 of the 32 general managers, the consensus and majority by far would say Caleb Williams is the number one quarterback on the board. The Chicago Bears did what they don't historically do, which is take the consensus guy number one.
Yeah,
and
right. They always wanted to get tricky or
Mitch Trubisky was not
Mitch
the
Trubisky,
consensus number one quarterback off the board.
Exactly.
They traded up in a desperate manner to get Justin Fields in a lot of ways to kind of save jobs. Now, Justin Fields was still a projected first rounder. There's a lot, you know what I mean? But like, again, they made moves that aren't like we went and like got the guy, right? Deshaun Watson was the
even with head coaches,
and a
man.
lot of people,
I mean, the Matt Nagy, they're like, we're going to find a hidden gem here.
And
Matt Nagy wasn't the bell of the ball.
Yeah, that brings me to Nagy and Trestman, because a lot of people are saying, all right, well, in the modern era of NFL football, which is 2010 to now, right, where you win with your quarterback, the Chicago Bears have tried with two different offensive guys. So they've had John Fox, defensive guy.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they have Matt Eberflus, defensive guy. You had Lovie Smith, defensive guy. And in between that, you've had these two offensive guys in Mark Trestman and Matt Nagy, both of whom were considered kind of offensive geniuses, younger, like in their prime head coaches. The difference being Mark Trestman had never done it successfully at the NFL level. He had been a head coach in the Canadian Football League and an offensive assistant or analyst in the NFL. And a very weak, meek personality, truly a nerd of a nerd. Matt Nagy, I thought, had a great personality for a head coach. But Matt Nagy never developed and called his own offense. He was Andy Reid's,
protege,
pawn.
yeah.
Right, he did not develop the offense. It wasn't his playbook, and he certainly wasn't calling the playbook at a level of the rate that a regular play caller does. Here you have,
which might be why Eric Bieniemy didn't get head coaching jobs after multiple
Matt Nagy,
cycles of being available.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I do think Matt Nagy hurt Eric Bieniemy. I think that's a great point.
Yeah,
Dan.
that might have scared people off.
If you go back to Ben Johnson's history, Ben Johnson's been in the NFL for 12 years. And he started in Miami after a couple stints in Boston College after being a backup
Dan
quarterback.
Campbell.
Yeah, he was a backup quarterback in college to TJ Yates at UNC. That's a deep cut name.
Wow,
and then literally has been an NFL coach since 2012, and all on the offensive side of the ball and making those connections, earning his way up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And if you remember, he took over the offensive play caller duties for Detroit the year that Matt Patricia was still the head coach and Anthony Lynn got fired. And then Dan Campbell comes in and goes, hey, I know you. I like you. I'm going to instill you. And you've been the offensive coordinator since then. What if you look at his numbers with Jared Goff and this Lions offense as from him taking over, they're one of the top offenses, all of that in the league. It's his playbook.
They've been first or second in every significant category.
So what I'm getting, unlike Trestman and Nagy, I feel more firmly in the fact that I'm getting a guy with true NFL longevity experience who's earned his way up. I'm getting a guy who has legitimate play calling experience in the NFL, in the NFC, in that division, knows the other teams, had to create the game plan for the other teams. And I'm also getting a guy who I never have to now worry about, well, if they take my offensive coordinator, what happens to my playbook, right? So all of those things are different for this hire. Again, if it flames out and in 5 years from now, there's no Ben Johnson and there's no Caleb Williams in Chicago, we'll say what we've always said about this organization. No one can succeed here. It is a failure from the top down of this organization. It is an organization that until they sell the team, like the Washington Commanders, they're just never going to have consistent success. This, to me, at least going back to Caleb Williams, consensus guy, you take the consensus guy. Ben Johnson, consensus guy. You get the consensus guy.
Yeah, you live and die by that. No one's going to fault you for taking Trevor Lawrence with the 101 pick if you're Jacksonville. And if it doesn't work out, no one's going to say, I can't believe they took Trevor Lawrence. Like, you got to take those shots, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dan, I'm beyond excited. I think it makes the most sense for Ben Johnson. It now makes a lot more sense why he didn't want to take a head coaching job last year, because it seems like he wanted the Bears job and he wanted Caleb Williams all along. And as soon as the Bears brought back Eberflus, he said, I'm not taking a head coaching job. Remember, he could have had Jane Daniels and the Washington situation. He chose not to. Maybe is that a mistake? looking at how great Jaden Daniels has been. Yes, but maybe Ben Johnson looks at his offense and what he wants to do with the quarterback and says, well, it's great to have a guy who's like Lamar. I want a guy who can scramble, but is not a running quarterback. I don't want – that's not my offense. My offense is under center, play action, get the tight ends involved. And all of that, what I've been saying as a fan since we've been doing this podcast in many, many years is why the hell don't we ever, whether it was Trubisky, whether it was Justin Fields, or now Caleb Williams, run an offense with motion under center, getting the tight ends involved. It just has never been a consistent thing. And I love that the Chicago Bears are getting that. I also love the reports that Dennis Allen might be his DC because he's a guy with head coaching experience, but is also young.
Not a fan of Dennis Allen, the head coach, but a good defense.
Yeah. As a good defense and a guy who also knows how to be a head coach, so can kind of advise, right? And also someone who Ben Johnson say, you're in charge of the defense, I'm in charge of the offense, but this is my fucking show. I love all
and
those
he's
reports.
Already in a midseason form at head coach. I saw the video of him being greeted by the staff, and he already gave like a big rally speech, you know. But no, the point he drove home and that you're talking about here is he said, this is where we wanted to be. Like this was a spot. And you know, like
that's not
obviously, yeah, and obviously
within
like any head
hours.
coach is gonna say that, but I truly believe him when he says it. Like I think this was, to your point, really the place that he wanted to be all along. And now he's in a division that he knows very well and understands.
And for all this, I know we're going to get to these games, but I just want to highlight this for all these people who, and I get it, Jaden Daniels has been amazing. And Jaden Daniels right now is the better quarterback than any other rookie quarterback. He might be a top 5 quarterback in the league. Like, I mean, he's having an incredible season. But for everyone who's just shitting on Caleb Williams, Dan, Caleb Williams had 3,500 passing yards with 3 different offensive coordinators in his rookie year. And when they suffered a 10-game losing streak, that is the 5th best in team history. He had a 62.5 completion percentage, 20 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 87.8 passer rating, and 489 rushing yards. This is a kid who finished tied for the lowest interceptions in franchise history with Jim Harbaugh back in 1990. This is a kid who, inside the red zone, 13 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. This is a kid who, of the rookie quarterbacks with the most passing yards in a game this season, Caleb Williams had the most, the second most, the third most, and the 6th most. 363, 340, 340, 334. Jaden Daniels with his highest was 326. So this
they relied on his arm a ton.
This is a kid who's proven that he can be a special player in this league and had really pop moments. If you didn't watch the Bears week in, week out like I did, and you just check box scores and look at, they lost again, Caleb must have stunk, you didn't really follow the story of his rookie year. I'm not arguing that he's better than Jaden Daniels. It's just not true right now. Jaden Daniels, he's looking like Lamar Jackson 2.0. It seems now we have 2 Lamar Jacksons in the NFL, a guy who's an elite passer and a guy who is extraordinarily calm, cool, collected under pressure, and a guy who is insanely talented with their legs in a way that we've only ever seen with Lamar Jackson. But I am saying that it makes a ton of sense why, if you're a smart offensive guy like Ben Johnson, you go, I want that. A lot of work to do. You have to fix the offensive line. You have about 3 starters you need to find in the offensive line, preferably guard, center, guard. And you have to find at least another elite edge rusher. This team is about 5 of those type of players away from being really competitive. But if you can tell me Ben Johnson steps in with his playbook and you can get me 3 quality starting offensive linemen to improve this offensive line and a stud pass rusher, there's no reason why the Chicago Bears team should not be really competing for a 7 seed next year at this point in time. I know I'm building up the hype train, but that is how we should feel. As far as the rest of the coaching dominoes go, this is going to be really, really interesting to watch now, Dan.
Yeah. Some key openings and interesting candidates out there to sift through as well. But we have plenty of time to get to that once the off season hits, and of course some open weeks here and there throughout the year. But we've got a divisional round to recap. We have a championship round to preview. So let's get into it. Looking forward to the Final Four. All right, let's get into our divisional round recap real quick as we have the Chiefs versus the Bills and the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Washington Commanders in our respective championship games. We'll start in Houston, or I should say in Kansas City,
Yep.
for the Chiefs Texans game, which looked early on like it could be a potential winner for the Houston Texans. But then it took a sharp turn, and there you have it. Kansas City comes out on top in this one. They are victorious and advance to the championship round, 23-14, the final there. My notes for this game, Mark, really was that even though the Texans kind of kept it and hung around, Kansas City felt like they were in control throughout the entire game, and they pressured Stroud an incredible amount. CJ just looked flustered for the vast majority of this game. And what stuck out to me was that the Texans were the first team ever to outgain an opponent by 100 yards or more and commit no turnovers and still lose a playoff game in the playoffs, I should say. So the previous teams were 49-0 in those instances, but they lose this one. And that's because the Chiefs are winning the way the Chiefs win ball games, and they've done it all year. They're the one team where I'm like, you always like talk like I feel like the Vikings of a couple years ago were like this. The Steelers of 2020 when they started 10-0 or 11-0 were like this, where you're like, yeah, they're winning the close games right now, but it's it one game here or there, and the dam is gonna break and they're gonna fall apart. The Kansas City's the one team where I'm like, no, that's just who they are, and they're so damn good at it that it doesn't matter if they're not scoring more than 17 or 20 points, because you just trust that this team is going to be able to win it the way that they've deemed is how they win football games this year. And so it was another signature Chiefs game, and nonetheless wasn't surprised by the outcome.
I mean, you nailed that recap. I will add, I think what's so funny about this game compared to the next games we're going to talk about, from here on out, after this game, turnovers were the thing, right? If you turn the ball over,
yeah, there's a story of the weekend.
But for the Chiefs, they win the game even though they didn't cause the turnovers, mainly because of Karlaftis and that defensive line.
Yeah,
obviously the penalties are bad. I was not as upset with the first roughing the passer, because in real time it was like, oh, he hit him in the head. Why did you do that? How dumb are you? Right?
You could see how the ref was like, well,
you could see the instant reaction. Boom! It wasn't like Mahomes flopped. The obviously the
hold on Houston was terrible.
That was really bad. But then also the second one, that's the one that needs to be reviewed, right? Where Mahomes is a runner and he goes down. They call it, but they didn't even touch him at all. It was the head-to-head contact from the two Texans players.
They hit each other, yeah.
The biggest thing the NFL can do, and I think it would behoove them. Listen, I don't care if an NFL game is 4 hours long and there's reviews. We love the NFL. We will watch every fucking
product
second.
Is good enough. Absolutely.
So I get that we have to protect the quarterbacks. None of us want to be watching this weekend if these 4 quarterbacks aren't playing. We get 4 incredible quarterbacks that have been playing really, really great football. If, Jalen Hurts, we'll talk about it, he's a little beat up, like that's a storyline right now. We don't want that to be a storyline, right? We want the quarterbacks to be healthy. We want them to play in this game. So I get you're going to protect the quarterbacks, but just say simply, any roughing the passer can be reviewed quickly by New York. And
why not any personal foul, even any 15-yard penalty?
And that's fine too. And just say, we have the technology now. You have the Sky judges. They check the concussions. They do this already where they can quick reviews. And just say, listen, I'd rather the refs tell the refs, I'd rather the refs throw the flag. Okay, that looked violent like the first one. And then they realize, oh, he shoved him in the chest. Okay, no, it's good. It'll take an extra 30 seconds to a minute and we'll get the call right? Like just do it. So I hope they look into that. I will say, I also don't know if you're able to penalize Mahomes for the whole like, oh, I'm going out of bounds and then I stop and then you hit me. I don't know if you can penalize that intent, But again, that's also why you should be able to review. If you throw a flag in the defender, say, listen, no. That fucker egged him on. Let's pull the flag. I don't know if you then can throw a flag on Mahomes. I don't want to get into that territory of intent, but I do think that you should be able to say, yeah, throw the flag.
Gaming the system,
It's a lot like they tell you on defense, just get the ball in the end zone and then make them review it, right? And say, no, it's not an interception or a fumble for a touchdown.
Yeah,
exactly. But in the end, as bad as those calls were, it was also great that the Chiefs dominated the Texans because the calls didn't determine the game. Could they have maybe made it closer, more interesting? Fine. But the Chiefs were the better team as far as just they're beating teams now, and they have for 2 straight seasons with brain power. It is just we have a better defensive line. We have a better defensive line scheme to get pressure. We have the best quarterback and the smartest head coach in the NFL. And oh, by the way, that quarterback and head coach have a weapon that when we need him the most is the king of finding space and turning 5 yards into 10 yards and 10 yards into 20 yards and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I mean, Kelce was signature throwback Travis Kelce in the playoffs.
Do I think Travis Kelce's the best tight end in NFL history? No. If I was building my all-time team, I probably would lean Gronk. And maybe even Tony Gonzalez, just by pure, like, that dude's more of a freak than Travis Kelce. But Travis Kelce has the best football brain of any tight end in NFL history. I think you can truly argue that.
Yeah, he knows defensive coverages better than anyone.
He's more in tune with his quarterback and head coach than any other tight end in NFL history. And there's something to be said for that. Chiefs win in an unsurprising fashion. I thought the Texans would cover, like truly cover and make it a closer game because the Chiefs have just played in closer games all year. But the Kansas City Chiefs, now as Patrick Mahomes has been a starter, their ceiling is AFC Championship game loss. And they're once again hitting their ceiling of at least going to be in the AFC Championship game. Yeah. Patrick Mahomes' career is the greatest start to an NFL career ever. Maybe the greatest start to a sports career ever with what he's done. I don't think he gets enough praise. And oddly enough, the Chiefs have a chip on the shoulder because everyone's saying refs and Patrick Mahomes didn't make the Pro Bowl. So he's going to use that as motivation. So it's, We'll talk about the preview coming on up, but the Chiefs they're special. They're just special.
They're just really, 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 really good. Well, I mean, speaking of kind of the dam breaking, it appeared that the Lions having 12 players on IR, defensive players on IR, finally kind of came back to bite them in the game against Washington, the nightcap on Saturday. Wild stuff, and I don't want to take anything away from Washington too. But, the first time in 33 years, Washington's, in the NFC Championship game. That's awesome.
It's great.
But really, I mean, this game started the run of what the narrative was going to be the entire weekend, the turnovers. 5 turnovers for the Lions, 0 for the Commanders. Goff was really bad. They needed to rely on Goff. And he didn't have a lot of help. There were some key drops. But he wasn't good enough in this game, that's for sure. And, of course, the defense let them down big time, but that was, you were going to need the offense to kind of carry this one into the playoffs, and they just didn't. I did think, I wrote down at a couple points, like they were getting too cute, that Jamison Williams,
that was tough.
And I get it. I'm not going to say, oh, Ben Johnson's all of a sudden terrible because he called that play, but it was like, what are you guys doing? Like, I know you're trying to find a spark and trying to get some life. But when things aren't working, to kind of pull that play at that particular time turns into an interception. Poor judgment.
It was a 10-point game. It was a 10-point game. And if you'd scored a field goal or a touchdown there, the pressure's back on Washington. And,
because what were they? They were on they were
just crossed the 50.
Of the field, right?
Or right around the 50.
Yeah, so that was a very questionable. I mean, I thought that was kind of the dagger,
the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, for sure. But hey, maybe Washington, Mark, was the team of destiny all along this year.
Listen, Goff didn't play great, and a lot like Sam Darnold in that sense. It's why Jared Goff is above those guys in the ultimate power ranking, because he's got more special in him. But the problem is when you go up against a Jane Daniels and you're looking at Jane Daniels' game versus Jared Goff's game, in that game especially, it's glaring how different and how much easier the game of football can be for a guy like Jane Daniels than it can be for Jared Goff. And
Yeah.
What was so special about the Lions team this year, they won games where Jared Goff threw 9 passes and they ran the ball 45 times. And then they won games where Jared Goff threw the ball 50 times and was great. They could beat you in many different ways. And you score that many points at home in a playoff game, 99 times out of 100, you should win that game. I 100% think that the Detroit Lions season, now looking back on it in total, they did not have enough horses on defense. We got a little fooled week 18. I certainly did, with Alex Anzalone coming back and how they shut down the Vikings offense, thinking, "Oh shit, they're back and they're going to be good enough." They just weren't. They weren't. And injuries are part of the game. The part of the thing that makes football special is that you not only have to be the best team, you have to be the best team that's playing the best football, who's the healthiest team at the right time of the year. And the Lions, over the course of the season, you could argue we're the best team. But the problem is they were not the healthiest team playing the best football at the best time. It also felt like the bye hurt them. It felt like they lost momentum. It felt like Aaron Glenn had a really bad day. And I don't want to blame that on the coaching interviews or whatever. But let's be honest, Aaron Glenn did not have a good enough game plan for Jane Daniels. And let's also be honest, if you're a Bears fan, I've seen it firsthand. Justin Fields torched the Lions as a starter. Go back and look at those box scores. And he didn't run the football. The Lions under Dan Campbell have not been good at stopping running quarterbacks. And I said it on our show last week. We could pull up the tape. That is a legitimate concern. Like, it's something to keep an eye out for. And Jane Daniels, the threat of him running and when he ran was enough to be the difference in this game and be special enough to win this football game. It doesn't make sense that the Lions season's over. I just doesn't. They felt to me like this was their year. I'm still grappling with what I think of Washington. They beat a really solid Tampa team, and they beat a Lions team that I felt could beat anyone in the NFL. And they did both games on the road. Do they have enough mojo and magic to go on the road again against a division rival? We'll see. But I'm shocked they're here. I'm truly shocked the Washington Commanders are in the NFC title game. If you were a Commanders fan and you called this, or you've been watching that team all year and you predicted it, yeah, they were a 12-win team. Good on you for staying loyal and seeing it. As someone who viewed them from afar and watched a couple of their games in prime time to really get the full picture, I didn't think they had it in them. But I think that's what makes Jane Daniels so special.
Yeah, no, Jane Daniels was a poised, not a finished product, but a much more, mature
He's older.
athlete.
He's 24 already, 25.
Yeah.
Those extra years in college.
I would be remiss. It is a show where we offer predictions every year and where we, give our, put our pen to paper and our opinions out there. I gotta slightly give myself a little bit of flowers. I thought the Dan Quinn hiring, and I thought Washington was going to be a good team this year. I didn't have them making the playoffs, but I think I had them going 8-9 or 9-8, which was much higher than pretty much most predictions I saw.
It's certainly better than I had.
So that's all I'm going to say about that. But I didn't anticipate Jane Daniels being this incredible, this buttoned up of a franchise. I didn't expect, the vast majority of what we've seen from them. So kudos to, it's awesome to see that literally a year after Dan Snyder is out of the picture, this team finally gets to the championship game in which he was supposed to bring them back to, multiple decades ago. Can I say this? If I'm an offensive coordinator,
like a Mike Kafka who's been getting head coach interviews and you don't get a head coach interview, wouldn't it behoove you if you are Dan Campbell and the Lions to go like aggressively pursue one of those type of guys, like a name like that,
Sure.
in the sense of like, hey, we have a loaded offense and I'm going to let you come in here and I'm going to let you groom and develop an
Shape
offense.
it. Yep.
And obviously Dan Campbell's an offensive guy. He played tight end in this league. He's going to have a philosophy. He's going to want to have things that resemble, right? And you're going to have to, obviously running the football is going to be a crucial part of success in Detroit because they have the best offensive line in football, or the second best, and an incredible running back room. And Dan Campbell is an aggressive coach who's going to demand his offensive coordinator be aggressive on fourth down. That to me seems like the best offensive coordinator job in the NFL. And if you're one of those coaches who's maybe interviewing for head coaching jobs or is looking for an offensive coordinator job, I would be submitting resumes quickly to the Detroit Lions. Now, maybe Dan Campbell already has the succession plan. Maybe there's someone in the building already who's knows Ben Johnson's system enough and is kind of like going to steal and build their own thing. I don't know what they're going to do. As far as defense goes, though, again, if I'm Detroit, I would say to myself, go be aggressive in maybe trying to hire a Matt Eberflus or someone who is a premier defensive coordinator in this league to say, come in here and fix this defense. And the great thing, if you're a Detroit fan, I don't know what their free agency situation is like, but I know that St. Brown, Laporta, Gibbs, Montgomery, most of that offensive line, Goff, they're all locked up. So truly, if you're Detroit Lions, you have clarity for your offseason, right? Go get healthier and deeper on defense. That's all you have to do, and find a defensive coordinator. People who are writing off the Lions, I get it. The brain drain's a real thing, but Dan Campbell is a culture setter. Dan Campbell is a guy who holds people accountable. I don't see the Detroit Lions falling to a 9 or 8 win team next year. I think this Detroit Lions team will take a step back, but I could also see them being a better team with a better chance to succeed in the playoffs as a 12-win, 11-win Detroit Lions team that's maybe a little bit more defensive reliant and a little bit grittier than they were this year as putting up 40 points every game.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. I think they'll come back strong, but yeah, what does the 2025 Detroit Lions look like? I mean, there are going to be a lot of questions.
Those are great openings.
But yeah, phenomenal openings and great for young up and coming coaches to build a reputation there, right? So no, that is enticing. I also wonder, David Montgomery got 7 carries in this game. It's not that it was the difference maker at all, but I do wonder if maybe as dominant as Gibbs was, what an extra 7 carries for Gibbs would have, done for them in this game. Yeah, they opened up with David Montgomery as the starter, and they instantly went 3 and out on that very first drive. I think he had -4 yards and 2 carries. Like, again, it's not going to be the difference maker, but it's just, I was curious if maybe he wasn't ready and they were just kind of anxious to get him back out on the field.
Yeah, it seemed as though it felt a little like we're going to see if this works and we're going to force it. And I give the Lions credit. They still scored 30 plus points. Like that didn't undo them, but it certainly felt like maybe hindsight's 2020. They would just start with the hot hand and ride everything. And if there was a moment to sub him in and get him some touches to get him into the flow of the game, then that would have been the point to do it. Another point I just really quickly mentioned, when DeAndre Swift had his best season as a running back with Detroit, Ben Johnson was offensive coordinator, so I'm just going to say that.
There you go. Hell yeah. Let's go. All right, let's go to the Philly Rams game. I'll let you kick off the commentary for this game for you. But, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles come out victorious 28-22.
I picked the Rams. I thought they were going to do it, man. After that Saquon run, I thought it was truly over. And for them to put themselves in a position to win, it just goes to show you if this Rams team can move on from Cooper Kupp, find another wide receiver, whether free agency or the draft, to pair with Puka, and convince Matt Stafford to stay another year, maybe upgrade one of their interior offensive linemen to help protect him a little bit better. But that young offensive line ended up being a pretty darn good offensive line by the end of the year. And again, let that defense just age and mature. They don't really need to add much to that defense, maybe a corner, but like just let that young defense mature. This is a Rams team, also one of the first years that you're not seeing McVay's coaches get poached because these guys are all young and growing with him as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of bright opportunities for the Rams next year. I think they absolutely should be the favorite. I was high on the Rams all offseason and this year. I feel very vindicated by that. I just knew that young defense would round into form. Kyron Williams is a really, really quality NFL running back. And as far as Southern or Dome teams, and they are a Southern Dome team dealing with those conditions, yeah, the Kyron Williams fumble was a killer, but overall, Dan, they handled it. Like they didn't seem as phased as like a Miami dealing with the cold weather. I truly think this is a Rams team. I truly think it's a Rams team with a couple tweaks could host those type of games next year in the NFC and be a 2 seed or a 1 seed that hosts games. In this game, I think it was just too much talent and too much veteran talent for the Philadelphia Eagles and too much Saquon Barkley. I'm concerned about Jalen Hurts, that knee injury. I'm concerned a little bit about the play calling. Kellen Moore.
Yes, me too.
Why you run, you have an injured quarterback and you're running an outside run on a crucial down late in the game versus Saquon, who's just been on fire. There are some questionable things, right? And then it goes to Nick Sirianni too. Like, what's your philosophy? You hear the play call. How do you not maybe veto some of that stuff, right? I could argue the same thing with Dan Campbell. You should have maybe vetoed the Jameson Williams pass, like, right? Like, there's some of that to them. Sirianni and Dan Campbell are both CEO head coaches, offensive leaning CEO head coach types.
Yeah.
What I'll just say when in watching this game, the difference is for Philadelphia. Their offensive line right now is just that good. And they've been given the most explosive, pure, talented running back in the NFL to create space for. And it's been a match made in heaven. And it's true that Saquon Barkley is like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs mixed into one. He really is that guy. Derrick Henry is his own level of special. We'll talk about him in a second. But a lot of people being critical of Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is doing what he needs to do to help them just win football games.
Yeah,
the problem is it's going to be now. It seems to me as though when we're previewing, we will hear in a little bit, injured Jalen Hurts in a game where I feel like he's going to need to make a big play. That's going to be a real question going into this NFC title game. In this game, he did enough to win the game. The game plan was good enough to win that game. I could be critical or nitpicky. I'll pass on that, and I'll just say this for the Rams. If they don't have that Kyron Williams fumble, I truly think we're talking about a Rams team that is hosting an NFC title game. And that's when you talk about the turnovers, the turnovers being absolutely crucial to the game. The Rams are much closer to a top 5 team in the NFL right now than anywhere else in the power rankings. I firmly believe that, especially where their arrow is headed.
I mean, you mentioned the Kyron fumble. I also think the Stafford fumble was, atrocious.
Yeah, not good.
I mean,
not good.
And I know they felt that, that it was already out of, when now we know there was plenty of time and availability to get back in this one. That was a terrible one. The Rams hurt themselves a lot this game. I agree with you too. Some really bad play calling from both sides late. I think that boot on second down when the Eagles had the lead and had the ball and can just, get a first down and you basically ice this game. They call a boot instead of just handing it off to Saquon. I thought that was really silly. And of course the Rams then go on to get the ball back with over 2 minutes to go. And then the ball's in their court and you give Sean McVay all the time in the world. That final drive was great. Stafford, in his element. It was awesome. And then they get all the way down and 3rd and short. You're at the 15-yard line. 3rd and short. To me, there was 1:20 on the clock at this point. And I was the second they the pass was complete and it was downed short, I was like, gotta run the ball. Like they're not going to expect it. Two, you have plenty of time. I know you have no timeouts, but you have plenty of time here. And if you don't get it, then you regroup for 25 seconds and you have this must-have it 4th down play. But they tried to throw it and catch Philly, like I don't know. It was just bad and it didn't they didn't complete it.
It didn't feel like
Sean
Sean
McVay.
McVay.
The sack. That was the sack, right? And then it becomes 4th and 8.
It didn't feel like Sean McVay. It felt like I'm with you, Dan. He's
that
so
was just mind-boggling to
control,
me.
and it seems like he sees like chess moves, like 5 moves ahead. Yeah. That felt a little bit like he didn't have. That felt like that is what he wants to do because they practice it all season long, but they practice it all season long in 70-degree weather in a dome, as opposed to him needing to make the mental note. What is our call in this moment in these conditions? And
or you're just like, hey, Matt's been on fire. Let's, oh, maybe you're not even thinking like, oh, it's 3rd and inches. Maybe you're thinking, oh, it's 3rd and 3. Okay,
like missed an assignment bad, and it killed it. Killed it.
Yeah. No, that was really bad. Really bad.
They were so close.
They were right there.
I was 0 for 6 if you include the national championship game on bets this weekend. It was a brutal weekend, and all of them. A couple of them were parlays, a couple of them were straight up, but like all of them, I was like, so close,
so close.
And that Rams money line one, I wanted it so bad. That was the one that killed me the most this weekend.
That would have been fun, but nonetheless, we have the Eagles advancing and a shot to maybe make this a repeat from Super Bowl a couple years back. But the Bills take care of business at home against the Ravens. Turnovers. That's the story.
Oh, I got a stat. I don't know if you saw this one.
It.
I don't know if you saw this one.
No, I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Lamar Jackson is now in the playoffs 0-5 when his opponent scores more than 14 points.
Yikes. So he's won 2 playoff games or 3. Well, I guess 3. He's won 3 playoff games, all with fewer than 14 points.
14 or fewer.
14 or few. That is pretty damning.
Listen,
it's because of the turnovers. Every time it's the turnovers. He has made a crucial mistake, and that's what we talked about last week. We said, okay, this game's going to come down to like who makes the bad mistakes, and then we said, okay, now who's more likely to make said bad mistakes?
It's Lamar.
And unfortunately, it's Lamar.
And Dan, I don't want to. If you want a Lamar rant of like putting Lamar's career and his expectations in perspective, go to Nick Wright. Nick Wright is crushing it with the Lamar Jackson rants, and he lays it out really, really well. And I don't want to steal his stuff and say it's my own, so I'm going to give him credit. But in a nutshell, he points out really brilliantly, Lamar Jackson, this should be expected. So many people are like, oh my God, I just didn't expect this from Lamar. Like, you should expect this. We now have enough data from Lamar in the playoffs.
Size.
His career is mirroring Peyton Manning's, where it's like unreal regular seasons, incredible talent that is virtually unstoppable in good weather in the regular season. But when the pressure is on and you're put in these tight situations, he's going to make crucial mistakes. Now, I get it. You can blame Mark Andrews all you want. And Mark Andrews did not have a good football game. And Mark Andrews is a really talented football player. But Lamar Jackson's fumble when he's trying to extend plays in that weather on that field, you got to be smarter than that. There were times, Dan, during the game, I literally in my head, I was like, I'm watching a Lamborghini, a guy with a Lamborghini who takes it out in the snow and is like, shit, well, this is the only car I have. And why did I didn't. Yeah, I should have also bought an SUV for these days, but it'll be fine. It's fucking a Lamborghini. It's a $200,000 car. Yeah. I'll be fine. And then you're like spinning the tires and you're just not as effective as you need to be. Now, that being said,
he just hates taking sacks because he's so used to be able to wiggling out of them. But that's
Lamar
that's the problem.
It comes back to bite really good in this game. But when you look at the game plan from Buffalo, they were a more complete team with a more complete team win. And they had a good enough game plan against Lamar. And I get it. It comes down to A lot of people were saying like Sean McDermott should have gone for it as opposed to kick the field goal to go up 8. I disagree, and I think the game played out the way exactly
Yeah.
as McDermott said. By
I was
going
50-50 on that. I could
Yeah,
see
but by
the argument for both equally.
by kicking the field goal, you force the Ravens to not only need the touchdown, but need the 2-point. And then if you play your cards right, and the Bills did, they would have had like a minute remaining. And
Yeah,
Josh
they
Allen
would
at
have,
home with a
yeah.
minute remaining, with I think at least a timeout, is how you want that to shake out. So I think McDermott, it was his best coach playoff big game. I think Josh Allen played into the game plan really well. He wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. If you look at the box score, but when you watch the actual game, you're like, the dude controlled the football and
Yeah, it
controlled
was
the
a
game.
steady pace, and
Cook is a
they
real
didn't make
special.
any critical errors.
When you look at Buffalo's weapons versus Baltimore's or versus Kansas City's, Kansas City has names like a Hopkins that you think of, right? Baltimore has Derrick Henry, and then obviously Zay Flowers injured.
Well,
But
I mean, Mari Cooper,
they have,
though, I mean, is a name.
yeah. Well, but I will say this: but when you look at Buffalo, it feels more like every single guy is a B plus, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like a bunch of dudes that are like any single one of them is going to pop off, and more than likely,
It's like the Packers receiving core.
yes, of the
You know?
5 guys, when you include Kincaid, the running back, and then the 3 wide receivers, of the 5 guys, 3 of the 5 are going to have a game. Like, they're just going to ball out. It's like they have numbers on their side. And Josh Allen is at the point of his career where it doesn't fucking matter. I'm going to find the hot hand. I'm going to get the ball into the right guy's hand. And credit again to Joe Brady for, again, calling a game plan of an unselfish game plan. It's like, this is what this game requires to win. I don't know where Baltimore goes from here. If we want to talk a little bit about Baltimore and their future, I don't think they need to change much. I think they just need to have had Zay Flowers. I think
I mean, I think their receiving core, like they need a big receiver too. Like they're a lot. All of their receivers are smaller dudes.
Yeah, like a Keenan Allen. Like they need a guy like the Bears. The Bears. I've already read some rumors that Ben Johnson, he's not like a Keenan Allen guy, and it makes sense, right? You have a Rome Odunze who's like a big possession receiver. You have DJ Moore, who is Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're like the same guy, undersized, tough as nails. They'll catch balls in the middle of the field and get extra yardage. And then, like, what from the reports are, the Bears, like, Ben Johnson wants to find his Jamison Williams, right? Like the big play, stretch the field over the top guy. And then you have your 3, like, possession, slot, take the top off guy. Keenan Allen is too much like Rome Odunze. He's like a third down possession guy, but he's towards the end of his career. Like, it does feel like you're right. Baltimore needs that guy. On a 3rd and 5, I'm going to run a slant and just get you it with my big body and my positioning and my route running. I agree with you. It definitely feels like they could use someone like that.
Also, only 16 carries for Derrick Henry in this game.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he was largely held in check, to be fair, for a good portion of this game. It was,
again, I feel
job
like
by Buffalo.
In watching the game plan, I didn't feel like they were underutilizing it. It wasn't glaring.
Yeah. That's true. Like every drive, he got his opportunities.
It just felt like Buffalo's defense had a better game plan to stop Lamar. And it felt like the Ravens offense didn't have that second, like that right hook, right? Like they had their straight left or whatever, but they didn't have that, like, body shot to like really key in to what they could take advantage of the Buffalo defense. I if I'm a Baltimore fan, I'm kind of looking in the mirror and I'm just going like, what do we need to do? Like, what do we need to do? It feels a lot like the Colts of the early Peyton Manning days. It's like, what do we need to do? Like, we have the MVP, we have talent, we have Reggie Wayne, we have Marvin Harrison,
Phillip Rivers.
It's like, what do we need
with the
to do? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think it's a Harbaugh thing. Like, I don't. Because for the Steelers fans, you could argue, like, is it a Tomlin thing? I don't think it's a Harbaugh thing, but I just feel like Lamar in the biggest moments has not played good enough, and they need him to do what Jane Daniels did. And we haven't seen that. And I think eventually we will. I at this point, I'd be shocked if Lamar Jackson doesn't play in a Super Bowl. I truly would, because he's just so good. And he's going to be in this position so many times because he's going to dominate the regular season if he's healthy. It's just a fact. It's like Peyton Manning. We have someone in their prime. It's like just schedule it in. He's going to win the division or be in the wild card. So it's a head scratcher for Baltimore. And
I mean,
I
the
don't know
problem
what
too,
to
Mark,
do.
is that as we get more and more great quarterback play coming into the league, the AFC isn't, full of it.
It's crazy. The
You
AFC.
there's like, if you just said everybody like one year they're going to get their shot, like you run out of guys at a certain point because
And you run
their
out of
career.
time.
If you want to say they've only got, like, let's say the window is 8 years, well, there's probably 8 quarterbacks that you could say like,
Yeah.
oh, they just got to get it that one time. I mean, like, that's going to be hard. It's
And
really hard to win this league, and not to mention you're competing with a Mahomes who's probably going to get there multiple times. So
and
you're
then
really
that's
only working with like 5 years
great point. It's a great
of an
point.
opportunity, right?
And
So
Mahomes and
Josh Allen,
Mahomes
Joe Burrow, Lamar,
he's and
Herbert,
Mahomes is the
like,
roadblock. And
yeah,
Mahomes, he's now the veteran, but because he's a year older than Allen and Lamar, like he was drafted a year before them, but they're all the same age. Burrow, he's only 3 years ahead of Burrow, draft class wise. Like they're all the same age. You can't sit there and say, oh, he's the old guy now. They're of the same generation.
right.
But the problem is he's not the problem. The difference is Kansas City has hit an organizational home run with Andy Reid, with Steve Spagnuolo, with Brett Veach. They have hit an organizational home run. Now, the Chiefs are going to have work to do in about 2 years from now. Travis Kelce can only keep doing this for so long. Chris Jones, and the way he plays,
Absolutely.
he's not going to be Chris Jones in the calendar year of 2027, January 2027. If the Chiefs are in the playoffs, it's going to be Karlaftis. He'll be in his prime, but the other person's not going to be named Chris Jones, who's like a difference maker. Chris Jones may still be on the team and be like a solid player, right? Like a veteran who makes a play a game. So they're going to have to keep making adjustments, right? And if I'm Kansas City, what's going to be really fun to watch is offensively, do they go back to the Tyreek Hill type of offense when they move on from Kelce? Or do they go out and get the next great Iowa tight end? You know what I mean? And do they just pair Mahomes up and they keep this thing rolling? We'll see. But yeah, it's the same thing with Baltimore. You're right. Like the windows are open now. The window is now. And the problem is
there has to be urgency.
You're losing to a guy in Josh Allen whose window is now. And Josh Allen might lose to a guy with Mahomes whose window is now. And the AFC is, and that's again why if you're an NFC team and you're looking at and if you are an NFC East team, you're Dallas and you're New York, Philly, you're looking at Jaden Daniels. And if now you're Chicago and Green Bay and Detroit, you're looking at Jaden Daniels and you're saying, wait a minute. This guy came out of nowhere in a year. If you're San Francisco and you're looking at Jaden Daniels, if you're the Rams, you're looking at Jaden Daniels, go, is this going to be his conference for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
Well,
it's a weird conversation
Philly,
to have because, gosh, I mean, if I think back to like our heyday era of watching, it was Ben, Peyton, and Brady in the AFC, right?
It was 3
and
guys,
then,
and it feels like it's Lamar, Mahomes, and Allen. Like those are the 3 now.
And then there are the guys Philip Rivers, Justin Herbert. Is
that's
Joe
Burrow.
Flacco? Is Joe Flacco
Burrow.
gonna? Yeah,
because
probably.
Burrow's
Yeah.
talented, but he's held back by his organization.
Yeah,
kind of like Phil.
But then and then you had so many other like solid good players that you're like, well, where's the room for them? The Carson Palmers or Andy Daltons. So, where's the room for a Chad Pennington or like, are these guys gonna Ryan Tannehill when he had a couple solid years with, like, it's like, yes, they're good enough to like have contracts with their teams and they're good enough to be like, oh, you've got a franchise quarterback, but when you've got a big 3, then you need to just have one of those big 3 or strike gold in one particular year. And unfortunately, the big 3 is turning into like a big 5, and it's harder to get into that group.
And in the NFC, on the flip side of that, there was Rodgers, and then there was a bunch of other guys, and it rotated.
Exactly.
And
Breeze,
yeah, it was Rodgers and Breeze, and then a bunch of other guys. And so if you're the NFC now, you're looking at it, you're going, it looks like Jane Daniels is claiming one of those spots, right? And it looks like Jane Daniels is asserting himself into that. Now,
yeah.
if
And
you're
I mean,
Chicago,
Hurts, like, where does he belong?
if you're Green Bay, if you're Philly, it feels like you better get one now, right? Like you better get another one now with Hurts, because you might quickly become the Steelers of your division, where it's like, well, shit, we're looking up at this guy, and we feel good about our team, but we don't have that special playmaker. And I'm sorry, but as important as it is to win in January and be great in January, the only way you're in a good position to win in January is if you're really good during the regular season. And what we've seen from Lamar Jackson, like a Peyton Manning, they screwed a lot of guys out of having home field advantage, and then they laid eggs, but it didn't really matter because by the damage was already done, because talented quarterbacks couldn't get home field advantage like a Joe Burrow, even get in the playoffs, because they couldn't win enough games to keep up with that guy in the regular season. I mean, Justin Herbert won 12 games this year in the regular season. I know it's a 17-game season, but still, that's 11, 12 games. So you take it what you want. And he was one and done because he had to go on the road. And it just, but it's like, it's a really, really, really,
it's just hard.
Sled. Yeah, it's
hard
really
to get
hard
there, man.
And that's why if I'm a Ravens fan right now, I don't know what to do. Like I've racked my brain. I don't know what the Ravens do.
Yeah.
Add a possession wide receiver. Keep making sure that defense stays young and can rush the passer. Like that's all you can do right now.
Yep.
Like right now, it's weird.
It is strange. All right, so let's get to the preview of the championship round, AFC Championship game. We'll get to that January 26th, 6:30 Eastern Time on CBS. Chiefs at the Bills. Kansas City is favored by 2. Interesting spread there. I'm staying away from a spread because also I would lay it out there right now. Like I would love to see the Bills win and get a shot at their title. But I also feel like I don't have this hatred for the Chiefs that it has captured much of the NFL fandom. I think like seeing a three-peat for the first time ever in history, that would be cool too. Like I love seeing greatness play out, and who knows, man? Like it's the NFL. This could be the Chiefs' last window, with Travis Kelce riding off into the sunset, and as you mentioned, Chris Jones, and maybe Andy Reid retires in a couple of years. Like you got to take advantage of the times you have, because would you be utterly shocked if at the end of Patrick Mahomes' career you said he actually finished with 4 championships? You wouldn't. I don't think you'd be shocked because it's the NFL and that stuff happens, right?
Yeah, and he would still have an argument for the greatest of all time, depending where his numbers land.
Oh, no question. But no, I this is a fascinating game. I'm really interested because it's
the first
Bills
game
are going to have a different game
right?
plan. Yes, it's the first game. It's all. Or no, I'm sorry, it's the second. It is the nightcap. The 3:00 game is Eagles Commanders, so this will be 6:30, and again, it's Eastern time.
So I'll say this at this point in this point in time, I am the winner of the AFC title game is who I'll be rooting for in the Super Bowl. Now you're going to say, Mark, you're a Bears fan. That's your bias showing. Absolutely. I don't want Jalen Hurts to get a title in the Eagles. I've never been an Eagles guy. And I certainly don't want to see Jane Daniels win a fucking Super Bowl as a rookie year.
Hey, first rookie ever, though, that would be something, man.
I know, but
the Chiefs.
I don't want to see it because the memes are already annoying, and I've already had to lay out the stats. If Caleb Williams had Cliff Kingsbury and Terry McLaurin in that scheme and stability and a new owner, I think he'd be in a really good spot. He could even be in this spot right now. That's near here or there. For Buffalo and Kansas City, I'm picking the Chiefs to win this game because I refuse to sit there Sunday night and say to myself, "You fucking idiot! Like you know what you're like. You knew this was going to happen. Like you knew this was going to happen." So I refuse to do that. I will lose money on the Chiefs and go down with the Chiefs as a sinking ship. I think deep down in my heart of hearts, I will be rooting for Buffalo. I agree with you. I'm not anti-Chiefs at this point. And I think part of that is because I still think there's parts of them that are so enjoyable and lovable. And we're quickly forgetting the reason we hated the Patriots. They were cheaters. Spygate, Deflategate, the Tuck rule. There were things about the Patriots that drove us so nuts. And yes, you could argue, well, the refs love Mahomes. But again, they didn't win that game because of the refs, right? Like and I get how people could be hating on the Chiefs. Brittany Mahomes is not a lovable figure. Like it's easy. Like if you're just a guy who drinks Bud Light, the lowest form of beer, and
by the way, Bronze, Sterling, and Golden now are their children's names.
Yeah, but Bronze,
I didn't even know that.
But Bronze is kind of cool because you think, well, he's the second child and he's the only boy. Why is he Bronze?
Yeah, no, Bronze she's the oldest daughter. Yeah.
No, Bronze is the boy.
Oh, Bronze is the boy? Okay. Yeah, I saw a meme that said, like, imagine if you're,
and it's because, I get it. And it's because he's Patrick Mahomes the third. So third place is Bronze.
Ah, okay. All right.
See, it's kind of cool. Kind of cool.
But it's like to name all of the kids after types of metals. Like, are we going to get strontium and tungsten next? That's what's coming down the pipe?
No, they're going to have twins. It'll be rust and and iron. You know what I mean?
Rust and copper.
Yeah, rust and copper.
Yeah.
As far as game plan goes, how the Chiefs win, in my opinion, I'm thinking the game looks a lot like most Chiefs games do. I think it's 27-27, 24-24, 20-20, 30-30, like how it is. I think Josh Allen's going to play a hell of a football game. And I think it's going to come down to the fact that Patrick Mahomes is going to do the things that Patrick Mahomes, we've seen him historically do. And it's going to annoy the fuck out of us. People are going to go wild online. And he's going to scramble and do his little thing. And then he's going to walk back to the huddle and do this motion where he always does. And his weird, like, limp hand. And he does this. And Andy Reid's going to be frozen with a mustache. He's going to hold the card. And they're going to Harrison Butker's going to kick a field goal with 10 seconds left. And the Chiefs are going to win. I mean, I'll say this. If Buffalo wins this game, it's because they win the game 30-17. And they get up 17-0 at the end, midway through the second. And they're going to win this game because the Chiefs this season, and really for 2 seasons in a row now, have not been able to push the ball downfield at all. And Buffalo will win this game because the Chiefs get the ball to start, and they go on a 10-play, 7-minute drive, and they kick a field goal, and they're up 3-0. And then Buffalo goes on a 4-play, 70-yard drive that takes 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and they're up 7-3. Like, I watched the national championship game last night. Notre Dame had the longest drive in college football playoff history to start the game, 18 plays, 80-something yards, 9 minutes on the clock, and they went up 7-0. 2 minutes later, it was 7-7.
Yeah,
4
it's
minutes
deflating.
later,
That's deflating.
It was 14-7. And Buffalo can do that. They can do that. I think their offensive line is good enough to do that. But in order for them to do that, that means I have to think that Patrick Mahomes is not going to convert third downs at home. And I can't tell you that's going to happen. So my gut says that I don't care what the score is. 17-20, 23-20, 24-21, 27-24, 30-27, whatever it is, it's going to be close. And it's going to be Patrick Mahomes doing what he does late in the game and probably getting a call. And people are going to be upset, but he's the magic man. And Allen's going to be heartbroken. And we're going to sit here and feel bad for him, but the Chiefs are going to march on their way to 3 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of similar thoughts to this game as well. I will start with the Bills' game plan because I agree largely with what you said there. My whole thing is, if you're Buffalo coming into this game, you have to scrap what you did last week and say that's not going to work this week, because
100%.
last week it was about possessing the football as much as possible, keeping the number of possessions down overall, keeping the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hand as much as possible, because they are such an electric offense and they can match you offensively with big plays. And that worked. They ran the ball, they made the timely plays, and just wait to capitalize on that error, and that will be enough to win it. This week, that's not the case. I agree. You got here behind the arm of Josh Allen. What you need to do, your main priority, is to force Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs to score more than 30 points. That's got to be your number one goal. And by doing that, you have to come out guns a-blazing, let Josh Allen air it out, and get an early lead and put the pressure on. Make Kansas City play a different type of game than what they've been used to this year, which they've been the ones that are controlling the time of possession and getting timely drives and long drawn out drives and kind of wear you down over time. Buffalo has to be the one that constantly applies the pressure. Okay, you just had a long drive. We're going to come back and get a 2-minute drive where we're going to, push it to 80 yards down the field in no time and get your tired offense back out on the field and make you, match that. And so that's going to be the way that the Bills win this game. And they absolutely can do that. Their defense is opportunistic enough to where if they can put Kansas City in that less than comfortable position, maybe they can get Mahomes into a mistake. But again, leave it up to the AFC Championship game for it to be the first game all season where the Chiefs score 30 and they go and score 42. And, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, but at least make them do it and make it look different than what they've been able to easily win games throughout the season as. Say it's mano a mano, and it's got to be Josh, your guy versus my guy, and let's win it that way. But ultimately, to undo all that, what I just said, I think the Chiefs will win this game too. And I think it's because their defenses will apply enough pressure on Josh to where he won't be able to do that consistently enough. And I don't think their playmakers are good enough. Like, where's Amari Cooper? Like, they haven't had the big plays down the field that, they've liked to have. And so I just think the Chiefs are good enough to dial up enough to where they can make them play their type of game, at least meet in the middle. And, if it's that, I'm going to take the Chiefs over the Bills. So that's really where I have it. I'll say it's, if I were to put like a prediction out there, I'd say like 28-24 would be the final.
Dan, I will say this. The one thing I love about the Buffalo Kansas City rivalry and why I said it last week on the show, I want Buffalo versus Kansas City, is that I truly believe when push comes to shove, if the game is in Kansas City or the game is in Buffalo, both teams are built for the weather. Both teams are built like the Ravens felt at times a little bit like the Rams last weekend, where it's like the slipping around, the sliding, the fumble from Lamar, where it's like, it feels like a Ferrari a little bit in the snow. Both of these teams have quarterbacks, running games, defenses that are like, I don't freaking care what the weather is. I can play in it. And so I don't have to sit here now worry about, Buffalo's going to Kansas City or Kansas City's going to Buffalo. That's null and void. Like, it's a moot point. It feels like you're going to get the mano a mano. And it does feel as though if there's one quarterback in the NFL who's capable of overcoming the magic that Patrick Mahomes has been gifted, it's Josh Allen. And Josh Allen.
And Joe Burrow. Because he's done it. Joe Burrow's the only one to have done it.
He has done it. The problem with Joe is it's a lot of out of sight, out of mind. I mean, it's 2 straight years now of not being in this position, of really having that. Well,
for sure.
The Chiefs did, the Bills did, the Chiefs did beat the Bengals. But but I still think in the end, because the organization that Buffalo is built right now, I trust it more than Cincinnati, even though Cincinnati's been to a Super Bowl and all that.
Well, and their defense is way better. So
it's
gonna be that's gonna be Bills are the only team to beat the Chiefs this year. So like the proof of concept is already there. Like, they can win, and they scored 31 in that game. So
it's gonna be
if you're Buffalo, if Buffalo wins, they've got to score 31.
Yeah,
like, to me, that's the recipe. So
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. All right, let's get to that early
all right.
game.
The other game, the early game, yeah, I don't know. I started, that's how it is on the ESPN sheet here. I should have started with the early game, but here we go. The early game: Eagles, Commanders. Eagles playing host, and Philadelphia favored by 6 points in this one. I feel strongly about this.
You do.
And I've had since I think maybe like going into week 18, my prediction was Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl. I felt like the Eagles are the best roster in the league, and then the Chiefs are the Chiefs. And I like, so that was my pick. So I'm gonna stick with that. I think the Eagles win. I think they win pretty handily though, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I'd love to see the Commanders give it to
A
the
great
Eagles.
game, yeah.
I'm not as concerned about Jalen Hurts' injury, and I also think Saquon Barkley could literally win this game by himself. I just think the roster's just too good. That's just really what it boils down to. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like what happened with the Lions last week. 12 defensive guys on IR. Eventually, chickens come home to roost. Washington, awesome story. Great rookie quarterback.
They lost
Great
their best
cohesive
offensive lineman
chemistry.
in that last
They
game.
did. And if you're talking about just roster buildup, like they still have a lot of holes. Like this team needs like players, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just if you look at it side by side, it is David versus Goliath type of situation. But kudos to Washington for like getting to this point. I would be pretty surprised if they won though, just because everything the Eagles have going for them. So yeah,
I
barring
love
some
that.
crazy turnovers by Philly, I think they win this one pretty handily. So I would take them to cover.
I'm on the Eagles too because the 2 times these teams played this year, the Eagles won handily in the first game, and the second game the Eagles barely lost, and that was with Kenny Pickett, and that was the game that Jalen Hurts got that concussion. So clearly the Eagles have a little chip, right? Like, whoa, it's 1-1. It's not like them Washington can go in there and say, you can't beat us 3 times in a row, blah, blah, blah,
Right,
underdogs. It's more like, hey, we beat them, but, asterisks and no Jalen Hurts. So there's not that concern of like emotional buildup in the game. Obviously, NFC East, these teams know each other really well. I'm with you in the sense that I think Saquon Barkley can win the game by himself, but I think what wins the game is the defensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles. A beat-up offensive line for Washington. Jalen
no
Carter.
room for Jaden Daniels to run.
Jalen Carter is such a freak.
He's incredible.
Such a freak. I think that Philly defense can keep up team speed with Jaden Daniels. I think it's lower scoring. I think they hold it and it's field goals. I think it's a lot of like both teams a little tentative, not wanting to lose the game. I think you'll see Washington kind of throw that play with house money. We have nothing to lose. No one picked us to be here. And that'll help them in the first half. Like I wouldn't be shocked if it's 17-14 at halftime, Washington, and you're getting a little nervous. And the second half, everything settles in and Philadelphia ends up winning 24-20. I think it's a close game. I think it's a good game. But from everything I know of these teams and everything that my gut tells me of how playoff games win at home for Philadelphia, they have the chip because Washington beat them. They have the best roster left in the NFL. And they have a quarterback who's still really capable of making giant plays in giant moments. We've seen him do it. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl they lost. That's definitely still in there, and it's definitely still there. And Saquon Barkley is the best weapon in football left in the playoffs, probably still just in the NFL in general. So yeah, I'm gonna take the Eagles as well. I'm with you. I got a Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl rematch.
Let's go.
Can I quickly, to wrap this show up, can we rank of the 4 matchups which ones we would like to see the most?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Number 1 for me is Buffalo and Washington, because I think either way, then you're getting a winner that is taking the monkey off its back. And then ultimately I would root for Buffalo because they've never won it, and City deserves it, and they got the best player and all of that stuff. So that'd be number 1 for me. What would be your number 1 matchup?
My number 1 matchup is Kansas City and Washington, because I think with Kansas City, then you have the 3-peat versus the rookie, the sensation. So, like, to me, I think
Yeah.
that's like you sell that to the league sells that, and you're like, DC's a big market. Kansas City is so well known and they pull numbers in. They're an easy brand to sell for the NFL. So I think that to me makes the most sense, like on the billboards, like the rookie sensation versus the dynasty. And that's a
Yeah.
really interesting thing. My second one would be Kansas City, Philadelphia. And again, the rematch. Can Jalen Hurts exact his revenge? The best roster versus the team going for the three-peat, the storylines going into it, the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, will he retire? Will he not retire? Those type of things. Where are you at for second matchup?
Yeah, so besides Buffalo and Washington, more so for the storyline for me and two really exciting quarterbacks. Other than that, I'm not putting Washington in the conversation until my number 4.
Yeah.
Just because then after that, I'm going for like what's the game that I'm looking forward to watching the most, right? And so number 2 for me would be Chiefs Eagles, definitely, because I just like the two best teams in the league. Just on paper, right? And then you got the three-peat, you got the revenge story, all that good stuff. And then it would be Bills, Eagles at 3 for me, because I think that would still be a really exciting game and two kind of different. It would probably mirror the Bills-Ravens game to me. Like, I think the Bills would have to take that type of approach. And it just could be really fun and like down to the wire and really exciting. And then it would end with Chiefs, Washington for me. I don't think there's a bad matchup, though,
I agree.
in this slate. I think all of these teams, like, got to this point and were deserving. Like, as of last week, even, I felt that any matchup of this divisional group, I was like, I'll take any of these teams in the Super Bowl. I think they're all deserving, so yeah,
I
you
was
can't
funny.
go wrong.
We're the exact opposite, because I would go Bills,
Yeah.
Eagles 3, and then Washington and Bills 4. And again, we're just seeing it slightly different in the sense that for me, Washington Bills, the only exciting thing is someone gets the monkey, right? But if you're
but it's probably a blowout. Yeah,
I think the Bills win that one pretty easily. The only thing I would say towards if Washington makes it, no matter who they play, they'll have earned the fuck out of that.
Yeah, because what a run! I mean? Yeah, right.
It's an incredible run, and Jaden Daniels has played magnificent in his 2 wins so far. He's got to play magnificent to beat the Eagles. So you would have this kid on the greatest run in NFL history, you could argue, for a young player, especially.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, like the Flacco 2012 run was really good.
The contract year,
But
so
I mean,
the last thing I'd want to end with really quickly, we started with the coaching search and talk. Can we end really quickly by saying, of the jobs left
most desirable
open now, what do you think if you were the top candidate, who would you be like, that's my choice? Rank the rest.
So what do we have here? We have Jacksonville, we have Vegas,
New Orleans, Dallas.
Oh yeah, gosh, I forgot about
that. And the Jets. Dallas, New Orleans, Jacksonville, Vegas, the Jets.
I mean, that's tough. The only one of those that I think has a quarterback that you can go to a championship with is Jacksonville. I think I would probably, man, that's hard. I think I would go Jacksonville, because the tough thing is the Trent Baalke situation, right? Like he's
not a winner.
Supposedly not a good person to work with, not an easy person to work with, and like he clashes with all the head coaches, right?
He's not a winner,
and he's not a winner. The good news is like Shad Khan has proven like he's willing to spend. So you're going to a place that is willing to do what it takes to win. You've got a generational quarterback, and you've got a really good you have a good roster that you can work with, right? Defensively, there's questions, but you've got a lot of playmakers. Brian Thomas seemed like a great pick. I think that would be exciting and a division that's winnable. Like those are very enticing elements. So to me, I would still say like Jacksonville would be the spot.
I'm with you. Jacksonville's my number 1. So what's your number 2?
Number 2 would be Man, that's really tough.
Can I
If
make
I'm
my
thinking
case
of,
for two? Can I make my case for
yeah,
two?
please do.
New Orleans, because your division is
Okay.
extremely winnable. And New
Yeah.
Orleans, while yes, they have some huge cap issues coming up, that also as the head coach would give me some reprieve. Like, listen, I came into this mess, right? Like I inherited this mess. You can't blame me for the fact that we're in cap hell. But if I'm New Orleans, I get one more year probably of Derek Carr, and then you can move on from him. But I'm also feel like if I wanted to, if I got that job, I could like stand on the hill for Sam Darnold. And then if you're telling me I get Sam Darnold with Chris Olave and you just re-signed Alvin Kamara, who's at the end of his prime, but still a really productive player, that's some pieces on offense, right? And a defense
Yeah.
that's got
Yeah.
some pieces in a winnable division. I think, like, to me, New Orleans would be the second most desirable opening. And I would argue that,
Good
hey,
ownership group.
yes, and if you're complaining about the cap space, like, don't blame me, right? Like, it's more open to start fresh, but also if you wanted to grab that veteran quarterback like a Sam Darnold, sign him to that 3-year, $100 million Baker deal, then you say to yourself, I got Sam Darnold and Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara. You got Baker Mayfield and old Mike Evans and Bucky Irvine. You have a defensive coach. I'm maybe an offensive coach if I'm Mike McCarthy or something. Like, let's go. Like, I can win this
Yeah.
division. Fuck it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I that's a very compelling case, and I think New Orleans would be really close to number 2 for me, but I think I'm still going to pivot. I think I'm going to go the Jets. And the reason I say that is because of the market that you're in. The the pressure really isn't there for you as the head coach. I mean, they've had, kind of a disaster of a situation over the last several years. I think you go there with a very good young roster with some really good pieces, like elite talent on both sides of the ball, and you have still a quarterback that's kind of in your hands to decide how you move forward with that position. Now, yes, you're in a tough division with Josh Allen, but again, like, you're in a storied franchise, you have the pieces there. So if you're just a quarterback away, if you truly believe that, and I think the Jets are probably just a quarterback away from really competing in this league, then I think that's a super compelling place to go, because also then you have the opportunity to be that guy that brought the Jets back to life. And that could be an enviable position for a lot
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah.
Um,
I disagree.
so
I would, unless, can I make it very clear? The next three options, Dallas, the Jets, and Vegas, I think they have huge, way more negatives than positives.
yeah, but Dallas is last for me because I just don't want to be a part of Jerry. I want to be able to work with I think Vegas is compelling because Vegas is the true clean slate. Like, you can mold this
Yes.
team however you want to
Yes.
do it.
I would
It's
go
them in New Orleans.
I would go Dallas third, though. And my argument for me would
Oh,
be
all right.
it's America's team. Jerry
Yeah.
does not
It's a
fire
brand.
he does not fire coaches. Like,
That's
Mike
true.
McCarthy ran his whole contract out, and then they just mutually parted ways. Like, Mike McCarthy doesn't look bad in the Dallas separation. Everyone's kind of like, why the Micah Parsons even said, like, why did we do this? He's on his podcast saying that.
But maybe Jerry will,
As
because he's
annoying as
getting closer in age, he's getting more urgent. I don't know.
but as annoying as Jerry is, and as crazy as that is, they also have hit, right? Like, you do have a quarterback he's capable of winning games. You do have CD Lamb.
But not championships. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, listen, if you're taking the fucking Jets, the Jags,
right? No, I know. You don't have. You're
that not either. Winning championships, right?
No doubt.
My thing would be like, Dallas, no state tax. I get the prominence of the Cowboys job. I at least have Dak and CD Lamb. And then I can also make the argument of, like, look, what did the circus I deal with? It can help me maybe get my next job if I fall on my face too, because it's like I'm dealing with the circus. Because to me, I agree with you. Then fourth would probably be the Jets for all the reasons you said. I would go. I hate to say it, but I'm gonna go the Raiders last. I think the Raiders, to me, are the problem for me, Dan, is even no matter how much I believe in myself, no matter how much I believe in the clean slate, and Tom Brady. And I do think that's a really positive.
Mm-hmm.
You're at best for the next 3 years hoping for second or third in that division. And that's hoping then a Hall of Fame coach or another Hall of Fame coach has a down year with quarterbacks who are probably going to be better than your quarterback right now. Because
yeah, I mean, like you'll start with the fourth best quarterback in the division, and
I don't believe
how comfortable do you feel that you're
draft picks.
make?
I don't believe
headway.
in any of the draft picks this year. If they get one of those guys, and if you end up with Sam Darnold again, I maybe like him a little bit more than Bo Nick. But who's the coach that's coaching Sam Darnold? So it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I think Aaron Glenn ends up in New York with the Jets. I think Mike McCarthy ends up in New Orleans. And I think he's successful in New Orleans. I think he makes New Orleans like barely miss the playoffs or barely make the playoffs next year, and then they can build appropriately. I then think that Jacksonville ends up with Liam Cohen, the Bucs head coach, and then I think if you're the Raiders, you end up saying we're going to pass on a Joe Brady
Saleh.
And we're going to go with a Robert Saleh. I've also heard Pete Carroll, like they're going to say like transition, like get us 3 years, build the program, get us on the right track, and then retire, and we'll insert the next guy after that. But it's a better situation to walk into. And it won't be a firing. It'll be this guy rehabilitated our program, and now he's moving on, and we're going with someone who's not entering a nursing home. And so, it's crazy to think Joe Brady I think Joe Brady will be Ben Johnson next year. Like I don't get a job. Don't take a job. I made Josh Allen the MVP. I'm going back to Buffalo. We're going to make him MVP again. And then you look at the jobs open next year. Joe Brady is the young offensive mind who's open and available and pounces on a good job next year.
Yeah. No, I could definitely see that. Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. So
I have a feeling a lot of this is going to break.
Experiment.
I just have a feeling a lot of it's going to break in the next week, so I wanted to get it out there.
Yeah. No, it was a good call for sure. All right. Well, as always, another jam-packed episode here on the Football Lounge. We appreciate everybody tuning in every week. We've got a couple more of these to talk about real football, and then it's going to be off season before we know it, but excited to lean into championship weekend, and then of course the Super Bowl after that. So stay tuned. We've got much more to come, but for now, that will be Mark and Dan signing off. We'll see you here next week.
This has been a For Frequency's Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency's Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.